Good morning, Paul. It's Monday, the 20th of February. Here's the heads up brief for today. For the Southeast Asia production, we covered 17 issues. In North Asia, we covered 9, and for the Australasia and Pacific Islands, we covered 5. In South Asia, we covered 20 issues, plus the major issues in the Europe, Middle East, and Africa regions.
Okay, it was a fairly quiet weekend. There were a few issues, but please do go ahead.
Right, Paul. So in Papua New Guinea, a foreign university professor and about 7 people, locals, were kidnapped in the Papua New Guinea highlands. They were over there on an anthropological study. There's not much details that have come up so far.
Yeah, look, I've got a swag of information. I'll forward it to you shortly once I find my feet. I mean, the pilot kidnapping, along with various kidnappings that have been occurring, particularly in the resource sector, but now to the academic sector. This is a transfer between national museums. It's a really strong ecological area there in PNG where this has occurred. The prevalence of kidnapping in the highlands is of concern. We're working on as you know, a massive assessment on this because companies continue, as do academic institutions that are headquartered outside of the highlands of PNG, trust people that don't know the environment to help manage the risks, and they play down because they don't understand, haven't been exposed to the severity of these risks. This is particularly and concerningly of relevance to the resource sector, where they're headquartered in America and Australia, typically for PNG, and they've been to risky locations and operate them, and that gives them a false sense of security. They also over-rely on a management team that just simply doesn't have the experience. Probably the aptitudes aren't there as well to deal with what is a very unpredictable and a sudden onset of high-risk situations such as extortions, kidnap for ransom, kidnap for political purposes. But also they tend to have a managerial team that's used to managing commercial issues. They pick up people with academic qualifications in community development. They don't actually understand community development to be effective in Papua New Guinea Highlands or Papuan Highlands in Indonesia for that matter. They really need to have a strong experience in those locations. They need to understand that development without a separate and powerful and influential liaison group, then development actually becomes a dangerous gift-giving process that's ill-directed and creates all kinds of jealousies amongst the local community, and actually is counterproductive to what they're trying to do. So many management teams, and we experience it all the time, particularly Australian resource sector groups, where because PNG is close to them on a map, they assume they know everything. So the prevalence and the ongoing escalations of the use of kidnapping for both political and for ransom purposes is something that I fear, despite many reports that we've been commissioned to do for clients. They very rarely understand it because the management team don't have the expertise, and the management team blows it off as emotive issues that they're not too concerned about. Fortunately, new vicarious liability laws are going to actually start to hold directors responsible. So ignorance of the law is no excuse now with new vicarious liability laws. But until directors of major finance companies, major financial performing organisations in the West that see themselves as a shining resource sector growth company, until their directors get massive personal fines and jail sentences, it won't change because they overrate their ability in a boardroom to conduct mergers and acquisitions, make money, appease shareholders, link up with the government, sponsor football teams, do all the stuff that looks nice in boardrooms and parties and private sports events and vineyards. Doesn't cut it. And unfortunately, they don't need risk assessments. They need tragedies to overcome their own ignorance or arrogance, or probably both. So this is a real concern. These kidnappings are going to continue, but we see it ourselves. We write it very clearly. This is why you're not understanding your risk paradigm. This is why you're not geared up for it. But their own management abroad in their home countries, looking to justify their own, let me say it, irrelevant and overpaid existence when it comes to highland risks in Melanesia, ensure management that it's all hunky-dory, all smooth. And of course it is, unless you're the person or the persons that are either going to be killed when you get kidnapped or you're going to be traumatized for life for what is a horrific ordeal. And if you're sitting in a boardroom on the other side of the world, it's all nice. Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Uday. Sorry to get on my high horse there, but this is something near and dear to our heart, having been involved in so many unnecessary kidnappings. And all the time, these are done by organisations. We've had that conversation I just had with them. They're like, oh, no, I went to uni in Sydney and I'm really good at business, so I'm not listening to a word you say. So it's a grave concern. And what is an even graver concern is they ignore their very experienced teams in country and defer to their own judgment that they feel is superior and all-knowing. Thanks, Uday.
Thanks, Paul. I think that's a very necessary conversation that needs to be had, but thanks for that. Moving on. So Indonesian authorities are investigating how the Jamaah Ansharut Daulah, a terrorist group, has apparently been raising money or siphoning some of the funds meant for relief efforts for the November Cianjur earthquake.
Well, look, the November 22 Cianjur earthquake, and the sad thing is that this kind of thing just repeatedly happens, not only in Indonesia on terrorism, but corporations are just so susceptible whereby they think that they have funding routes and they tend to have a policing mentality that after there's a big problem and the problem gets found by accident or by a victim screaming and they look to close off or the problem and often to just PR a big smokescreen over it rather than get in and audit the systems for the vulnerabilities and proactively look for problems. These kind of things are way too frequent in Indonesia, but scaringly frequent in multinational organisations, despite the four big famous accounting companies, all from America, being it all over everything like a doona or a comfort blanket over a little kid, giving assurances that it's all taken care of and the little fella's warm, but just so many times we're going in to do audits and establish and close off loopholes for companies that have their own accounting teams, have spent a fortune on accounting fees, but just do not have the actual people that understand bad people. So it's all nice when it's all nice. It's all good when it's all good. But unfortunately, they've hired teams based on a fool with some expertise fooling a fool with less expertise and then engaging them on a fortune. So please go ahead.
Right. Paul, in Papua, in Indonesia, the Central Mamberamo region was arrested in Jayapura by the Corruption Eradication Commission. He's been on the run for months now. He's accused of embezzling government development funds.
Yeah, great. Just get one of our guys to send me a message on exactly his background, who he is, where he's from. I don't know that particular Bupati, which is, of course, the Indonesian term for regent. Thank you. Go ahead.
Sure. In Thailand, Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha said that he will dissolve the House of Representatives before the end of its tenure, which is on the 23rd of March. So it's likely that he will dissolve it around them, as MPs are still switching parties at this moment.
And when would that mean we could expect an election? Because I'll need to sort of probably deem some travel for myself and Bhargav around that. Could you let me know when an election's likely to be called or the election date to be set?
Yeah, we'll get some dates over to you, Paul.
Thank you.
Right. In South Asia, in Pakistan, terrorists have been arrested in Lahore and Karachi and across the country. Operations are continuing, but there's also major gaps. This is after the Karachi attack on the 17th of February, and even the recent mosque bombing in the Peshawar police lines area, in which 80 people were killed.
Okay, thank you.
In India, since the Tripura elections, over 100 people have been injured in 16 incidents. Now, the results will come out on the 2nd of March, so violence could continue.
Okay, thank you.
In Nepal, one of the parties in the coalition has quit, and right now the coalition looks shaky, and whether it lasts until its presidential elections remains to be seen.
Okay, that's of concern. Great, thank you.
In Sri Lanka, the Mitsubishi Corporation announced that it will close its offices by the end of March. It said that it's too difficult to operate in Sri Lanka due to the existing economic situation.
Yeah, look, I mean, the combination of the political crises and the way the politicians govern that country means that as an economic climate, it's a basket case. It's always having to put its hand out, get loans, and then seek to restructure them and not meet their commitments. It's fortunately one of those countries that's run by a few for a few. Okay, thanks.
Right, Paul. Lastly, in the Europe, Middle East, and Africa regions, the Iraqi federal government and the Kurdistan regional government are trying to figure out how to draft a new oil and gas law. Now, this is a very contentious issue over how to share the revenues. Right now, with the way things are, the government could collapse if they don't reach an agreement.
Okay, thanks for that.
And in Germany, unions have threatened to hold strikes at airports this week. 300,000 people were affected by a day-long strike by these unions on the 17th of February. So if they hold the strikes this week, it's looking to be very disruptive.
Yeah, okay. The whole issue of Europe strikes, and this is going to get more and more agitated by the cost of living, resource prices. That's going to continue to trigger issues, particularly in Germany, UK, and France. Thanks for the heads up. Excellent briefing.
Thanks, Paul. Anything else from you?
No, cheers.
Thanks.